Alright, boys and girls, welcome back to the channel. Today, I am back with another AFL way too early trade video. Again, a ton has been happening, not just only in the AFL world, but in my life. I just got back from seeing the brand new Superman movie. How cool is that? I've got a freaking cardboard poster of it. The movie was absolutely sick, man. I've been waiting like 2 years for that. I was so excited to finally see. I literally nearly started like laughing nervously laughing like a freaking Japanese schoolgirl or some shit before the movie was starting. I was that excited. Again, not only did that come out, but Justin Bieber, one of my all-time favorite artists, just randomly came out of retirement and dropped his first album since 2021, pretty much his first song since 2021 that aren't features, all of that type of stuff. It's just absolutely crazy. Again, the AFL world, there's some crazy stuff going on in there as well. A lot of trade news, as I just mentioned, and we're going to be talking about all of that today and more. So I thought we'd start off with an interesting one here, and it's the growing development that Rowan Marshall might actually be looking to leave the St Kilda Football Club. Now, this is a really weird one because, in my opinion, I think 3 or 4 years ago, Rowan Marshall would have been considered, a top 5 ruckman in the game. There was a couple years there where he was considered a top 5 ruckman in the game. But again, I think I would say this year and last year, he really has kind of dropped into, I don't even know if he's a top 10 ruckman anymore. And there are some times where Saints fans are just raging because this guy's having a bad game. But it's a weird situation with Rowan Marshall because I think he's been in this limbo of where his career is going to go. Again, there have been reports for a while that the Saints actually had plans to make him a full forward and have him as the full forward alongside Max King, and then he can play 30% of the game in ruck. Again, that was even more confirmed when St Kilda have gone balls to the wall to try and get, De Koning to the team. Of course, De Koning is going to be a St Kilda Football Club player. And I don't know if Marshall, I originally thought he was 100% on board with these ideas, but there's been a lot of rumours as of late. Again, rumours that Carlton are going to be interested in him. Carlton group chat, Carlton Instagram page, is saying, should Rowan Marshall be the Tom De Koning replacement? So I'm guessing Carlton would get their pick back for Tom De Koning, and then they would find a way to trade for Rowan Marshall. Again, wouldn't that be a glitch in the game if Tom De Koning, left Carlton get back pick 8 in compensation, something like that, right? Pick 7, and St Kilda are oh, you want Rowan Marshall, give us pick 7. So basically they move on Rowan Marshall for pick 7 and Tom De Koning. Again, imagine that surely couldn't happen. I don't think Marshall is even worth pick 7 at the moment. Anyway, I don't even know what he's worth. It's really hard to get a read on him. But Carlton are interested in him. Again, it's being said by Tom Morris that Rowan Marshall is a player that I believe Geelong would like at the end of the year. Tom Morris on if TDK lands at St Kilda, who could come after Rowan Marshall? And that's reported by Footy Classified. Again, De Koning going to the Saints is happening. We know it's happening. The thing is, though, is that if and when it does happen, will Rowan Marshall look to leave? Will the Saints even look to move on from him? Because in my opinion, I think teams are going to come hard for him. And I think Geelong will, of course, be one of them. They'll definitely offer up their first round pick and whatever else. Carlton will probably offer up whatever they can string together. I don't even know what it's going to be. They don't really have a whole lot, to be honest. The reality is that the St Kilda Football Club are going to get offers for him. I just personally think that they would rather keep, of course, Marshall to the team, and they would rather have Marshall and De Koning next year and just see how they go. And if they don't work out together, then they can move on Rowan Marshall in the next year's trade period. So I think this is a matter of, if you're St Kilda, you got to see how Marshall not only plays with De Koning, but also how he's going to play with Max King, because Max King should be back next year. And both of these guys, you're pretty much adding 2 key forwards to your team. You're adding Marshall as a key, and of course Max King as a key. And that's why bringing in De Koning is so important and pivotal for St Kilda to, of course, make this happen. So that's the news with that. Again, there's also been a ton of rumours and news to do with Jake Lever. Again, Jake Lever was recently dropped from Melbourne. Whether that was the right call or not is for you guys to decide. But it is being said that at the age of only 29, he's the gettable one, I think, which was being said on midweek tackle. Also being said by Tom Morris, rivals on watch as Lever was blindsided by recent dropping. Again, will Lever leave Melbourne? I'm not too sure. I wouldn't think so, but I mean, there are teams out there that should be going for him. I would have originally said North Melbourne, but I think it's time for North to take a back seat and stop bringing in these older defenders who I don't, know are helping their team as much as they want them to. I think if a team should get him, it should be a contending team. It should be a competing team. One I would actually really like, I think the Western Bulldogs would be really good for Jake Lever. I still think they may be looking for another key defender back there, and he would actually be a really good option. I mean, another one, depending how pricey he's going to be, I wonder if Collingwood will look at him. That could be another interesting option there. I mean, St Kilda, as mentioned multiple times on the channel, they're looking for another key defender or a guy who can play as like a third tall, can be a third tall but also play smaller, which Lever can. Again, will St Kilda look at him? I think there will honestly be a lot of teams who will look at him, and it's hard to know what his value is right now because he is getting dropped on one of the more bottom teams in the league. So definitely have to wait and see how that does all unfold, and I'm going to be very interested with that. I think he'll probably stay, but we'll definitely have to wait and see. Again, I've actually got a report here that I think is really interesting that I've been wanting to talk about on the channel for a minute. It's actually by a big Richmond fan page on Instagram called Tiger Faithful, and he or she, gender equality, I don't know. I don't know, the gender of this person has never been revealed. Tiger Faithful has been posting a lot about potential Richmond trades, all of the above. And there's one really interesting here that says Sheldrick the Tiger. Richmond are rumoured to be very interested in Sydney young gun Angus Sheldrick. The West Australian native was taken at pick 18 in the 2021 draft, but has struggled to cement a spot in Sydney's star-studded midfield group. Goes on to say, his best game this year was against Melbourne, where he had 26 disposals, 13 contested possessions, 5 clearances and 5 tackles. He's been made to toil away at VFL level and has put up 6 games over 34 disposals or more in the last 2 years, which is pretty crazy. He's out of contract at the end of the year, and I think we'd be able to get him for quite cheaply. We need competition for spots in the middle, and I think he could be a really valuable player for us. What do you think? Future second or third probably gets it done. Now, hear me out real quick. Scrap that noise on any pick. I actually think there's a player that Richmond could do here. If they really do want Angus Sheldrick, they could do a player-for-player swap. Again, we never see that in the AFL anymore. We never see player-for-player swaps. But I actually have a really good one. And there is a player on Richmond right now who I think will be getting a lot of interest in the off-season. And that does happen to be Jacob Blight. Again, as most of you know who are Richmond fans, Jacob Blight is really out of favour at Richmond right now for not a whole lot of reasons. We don't really know why. Again, when a player is often getting dropped, you can usually tell why. Like, there's like one little thing about them that you can be like, yeah, that's not AFL level. Like, you look at Noah Cumberland, and he was getting dropped every second week, and even though he'd kick goals and look okay, you realize his defensive pressure was absolutely terrible, and he wouldn't put on any pressure. He'd be like a training cone out there, and it's why he got dropped all the time. But Jacob Blight, I'm convinced Jacob Blight is only getting dropped because Richmond's backline is actually really good. Again, don't get me wrong, Richmond's backline at the moment is absolutely getting killed, and it's getting like 150 points scored on them every week. But the reality is that the first like 10 weeks of the season when Richmond actually looked okay, it was because their backline was a clear top 8 in the AFL. The issue was Richmond got a ton of injuries, the list competition spots became bad, the midfield gave up, the forward line proved its age of everyone being an average of 19 years old, and the back line got constantly under pressure every game to now they just, again, it's way too hard for them to keep up and they're getting 150s dropped on them every week. The reality is Richmond's back line, though, when everything is going right, is a top 8 in the league. It's the only good thing about Richmond right now, and it's the only thing that's not an average of like 18 years old. So Richmond's backline is really good for the most part. Jacob Blight, there are guys in the backline that are just doing more than what Jacob Blight does and are just more ready and have had more opportunity. Like, you can't really drop Ben Miller over Blight. You can't really drop a lot of those guys over Blight. But there are so many teams out there right now who are desperate for a key defender and desperate for a young one. And I think Sydney, they would absolutely love Jacob Blight. He'd be in their 22 every single week easily. And I think a really good player swap would be if Richmond said, look, we'll give you Jacob Blight and we'll bring in Angus Sheldrick. You guys need backline players and we need some midfield depth and competition in the list so we don't keep getting beaten by 150 and every player is on their best ability. Again, I'm not going to lie. I know Angus Sheldrick's a good player. I don't really know a whole lot about him though. And the reason that is because we haven't seen a whole lot about him. But the reality is just because you haven't seen a whole lot about a player doesn't mean there aren't a lot of things about them that they're doing right now that are probably considered very, very good. Again, you look at one that I really like to talk about all the time. Pat Lipinski, right? He was not getting a game in the Western Bulldogs team, and there was probably one or two things he needed to improve about his game to play AFL. Collingwood saw he had the fundamentals. They traded him in, and now Pat Lipinski is arguably the most underrated player in the league and is one of the best inside forward 50 kicks in the whole entire league. There are going to be players like that I guarantee you I think Richmond will look at this offseason. Angus Sheldrick, I think he'll be one. The reality is, though, is that Richmond have to be very careful because I think there won't be too much movement over this offseason. But the thing is, we are guaranteed to draft 3 players. Pick 2, pick 3, and Callaway as a father-son. And that's probably all you need for this year. But again, there's going to be players that get delisted. I think Bauer will unfortunately be moved on. Again, he just did his ACL. He's out of contract. I don't think they're going to bring him back. Jacob Blight, as I just said, I think will probably get traded, as he looks for more opportunity. There might be another player or two. There's been rumours as of late that Jaden Short, other teams are circling around him a little bit after he, again, has kind of struggled to get back in this team and is only getting in really now because Richmond are terrible at the moment. Again, I think, teams will look at him and ask the question. There'll be other players that Richmond for sure delist as well. Richmond could still look to bring in a player or two. I'm looking at Angus Sheldrick. He's definitely one. I'm looking at a guy like Elijah Sardis who, again, just can't get a gig at Essendon at the moment, but would still be good to add midfield competition. There'll be a couple players here that I think the Tigers will look at. And yeah, I personally think, in my opinion, the Angus Sheldrick, Jacob Blight, just, trade them for each other. I think that really does get it done. So I'm for sure interested to see how this, does unfold. This is the first player I think that Richmond have been really linked to so far this off-season. So far this season going into the off-season. Richmond really haven't been linked to anyone at all other than like Harley Reid, and from all reports Harley Reid is staying, and yeah, you hear all these teams being interested in all these players, and Richmond just really haven't been linked to anyone. But I also think the reason we haven't been linked to anyone is because a lot of the players we're probably going to be looking at are like players who just aren't getting an opportunity in the AFL that Richmond could see little things in. I would imagine this is probably being kept really under wraps on who they're interested in. So I'm very interested to hear all of your thoughts and opinions on this comment section down below. What do you guys think about, these AFL trades, and should Richmond do a trade that is Jacob Blight for Angus Sheldrick? Could you see something like that happening? Could you see them looking at a guy like Elijah Sardis, whatever it's going to be? Again, I'd very much like to know your thoughts and opinions on this down below. Leave a like on the video to let me know you enjoy it. Subscribe to the channel for the latest AFL content, AFL news, all of the above. Go and subscribe to my, gaming/movie channel, which will be getting linked down below as well. And I guess I'll be seeing you guys next time. Goodbye.